Physical pain has a definitive biological limit. When a nerve is compressed to its absolute breaking point, your body will eventually intervene and automatically shut down the sensation, wrapping the trauma in a numb, protective shock. But betrayal? Betrayal has no analgesic mechanism. It does not numb you. It sharpens your senses, forcing you to feel every jagged edge of the knife as it twists. It was 8:15 a.m. on a Wednesday. Outside, the brutal, unrelenting heat of Phoenix, Arizona, was already baking the asphalt of Camelback Road. Inside the sterile, brightly lit lobby of Mercy General Hospital, the air conditioning hummed aggressively, carrying the sharp scent of industrial bleach and bitter cafeteria coffee. I stood at the main surgical billing counter, gripping the heavy wooden handle of my cane with knuckles that had turned entirely white. My name is Arthur Vance. I am 58 years old, and for the last 2 years, my world has been violently reduced to the space between one dose of painkillers and the next. Severe lumbar spinal stenosis had effectively crushed the nerves at the base of my spine. Beneath my button-down shirt, I wore a thick, rigid plastic medical back brace strapped tightly around my torso just to keep my vertebrae from collapsing onto each other. Before my spine gave out, I spent 30 years as a forensic accountant. My entire professional existence revolved around investigating corporate fraud, tracing hidden offshore assets, and unraveling sophisticated money laundering networks. I do not process the world through emotion. I process it through ledgers, bank statements, and absolute facts. When I wasn't dissecting fraudulent tax returns, I spent my evenings in my study, using specialized tweezers to assemble intricate, historically accurate wooden ship models inside narrow glass bottles. My life was defined by microscopic precision and infinite patience. But standing at that billing counter, my patience was running entirely on fumes. Tomorrow morning, I was scheduled to undergo a complex, multi-level lumbar fusion. It was a highly specialized procedure utilizing imported titanium hardware, performed by a top-tier out-of-network neurosurgeon. It was the only option left to prevent permanent paralysis in my left leg. The insurance covered the hospital stay, but the surgeon's fee and the hardware required a massive, out-of-pocket upfront payment, $40,000. It was a staggering sum, but it was the exact price of reclaiming my life, my mobility, and my dignity. I shifted my weight slightly, and a sudden, violent spasm of pain shot down my sciatic nerve, feeling like a live electrical wire wrapping around my thigh. I stopped breathing for 3 full seconds, closing my eyes and waiting for the fire to recede into a dull, throbbing ache. When I opened my eyes, I thought of my wife, Diane. Diane is 42, 16 years my junior, and completely obsessed with the illusion of perpetual youth. We had been married for 6 years. Lately, I had noticed the microscopic deviations in her routine, the kind of anomalies a forensic auditor is trained to spot. She had started abruptly snapping her laptop shut whenever I slowly limped into the living room. She had changed the passcode on her phone. And, most glaringly, she had suddenly announced a mandatory, week-long marketing conference in neighboring Scottsdale that conveniently coincided exactly with my surgery and recovery week. I had let it slide. When your body is failing you, you simply do not have the cognitive bandwidth to investigate your spouse. You focus all your remaining energy on surviving the day. Mester Vance? The voice pulled me back to the present. The billing clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Brenda, was looking at her computer monitor with a deep, concerned frown. She tapped her keyboard a few times, her mouse clicking rapidly, before looking back up at me. "I have your surgical file ready, Mr. Vance," Brenda said gently, sensing my physical distress. "The pre-op blood work is cleared. However, there seems to be a significant issue with the financial clearance." "The funds were authorized," I managed to say, my voice fracturing slightly as another wave of pressure hit my lower back. I leaned heavier on the cane. "I arranged for a wire transfer of $40,000 from my joint checking account yesterday afternoon to cover the surgeon's retainer." Brenda shook her head, turning her monitor slightly so I could see the red, flashing alert on her billing software. "I'm so sorry, sir, but the transfer never arrived," she explained, her tone laced with genuine pity. "According to the automated clearinghouse log, the wire transfer was initiated, but then it was manually canceled at 3:15 p.m. yesterday. The funds were withdrawn from your bank, but not transferred to Mercy General. They were issued as a cashier's check to a different payee." I stared at the red text on the screen. The numbers didn't make sense. As an accountant, When an equation doesn't balance, my brain automatically begins running diagnostic protocols. The money was gone, but the hospital didn't have it. Because the out-of-pocket balance is outstanding, Brenda whispered, looking around the lobby uncomfortably. The surgical coordinator has just flagged your file. Mixter. Vance. We cannot proceed with the lumbar fusion tomorrow. Your surgery has been officially canceled. The sterile hospital lights seemed to flicker. The rigid plastic of my back brace suddenly felt like a cage. The $40,000 that was supposed to buy my physical salvation had vanished into thin air. I did not collapse. A forensic accountant does not panic when they find a glaring discrepancy in a ledger. They simply begin the process of isolating the missing variables. I nodded slowly to Brenda, thanking her for her time, and turned away from the counter. Every step I took toward the lobby seating area was a grueling negotiation with my own nervous system. I heavily leaned on my cane, dragging my left leg until I reached a hard, fiberglass hospital bench. I lowered my rigid, braced torso onto the seat, sweat beading on my forehead from the sheer physical exertion. The ambient noise of the hospital lobby faded into a low, insignificant hum. I pulled my cell phone from my jacket pocket and immediately dialed the direct line to my bank's premium customer service division. Within 2 minutes, I was speaking to a senior account manager. I bypassed the standard security questions using my secure PIN and demanded an immediate, detailed trace on the canceled $40,000 wire transfer. Mr. Vance. The bank manager's voice came through the receiver, crisp and professional. I am looking at the transaction log now. The wire transfer to Mercy General Hospital was manually intercepted and canceled in-branch at 3:15 p.m. yesterday. Your wife, Diane Vance, presented her joint account authorization and requested the funds be converted into a physical cashier's check instead. Who was the check made payable to? I asked, my voice flat, devoid of the crushing betrayal I was currently processing. The cashier's check was made payable directly to Diane Vance, the manager confirmed. I ended the call. The equation was now perfectly balanced, but the reality it represented was grotesque. My wife hadn't made a clerical error. She hadn't accidentally rerouted the money. She had deliberately walked into a bank branch, intercepted the exact funds required to save my spine, and walked out with $40,000 in her designer purse. I pulled up Diane's contact on my phone. I pressed the call button and pressed the speaker to my ear. It rang 4 times. On the 5th ring, the line connected. I expected to hear the quiet, professional ambiance of a Scottsdale hotel conference room. Instead, my ear was immediately assaulted by the heavy, thumping bass of electronic club music and the overlapping roar of people shouting and laughing. It was 8:30 in the morning, and my wife was clearly at a day club or a high-end pool party. "What is it, Arthur?" Diane answered, her voice dripping with extreme annoyance, as if my phone call was a massive inconvenience to her schedule. She had to practically shout over the pulsating bass. "Where are you, Diane?" I asked, keeping my breathing shallow to avoid triggering a spinal spasm. "I told you, I'm at the marketing summit in Scottsdale," she replied breezily, entirely unbothered by the blatant lie the background noise was currently exposing. "We are at a networking breakfast. Listen, I'm incredibly busy. What do you want?" "I am sitting in the surgical billing lobby at Mercy General," I stated, presenting the facts with the clinical detachment of an auditor reading a balance sheet. "The hospital just informed me that my surgery is canceled. They told me that yesterday afternoon you walked into our bank, canceled the medical wire transfer, and withdrew $40,000 via a cashier's check." There was a sudden, sharp silence on her end, save for the muffled thumping of the music as she quickly cupped her hand over the phone's microphone and seemingly walked into a quieter hallway. When she spoke again, the annoyance was gone, replaced by a defensive, aggressive hostility. "I was going to tell you about that tonight," Diane snapped, immediately shifting the blame. "You are overreacting, Arthur. I took that money because a massive, once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity came up through one of my colleagues. It required liquid cash up front. It's going to double our money in a year." "That money was not an investment portfolio," I reminded her, gripping the head of my cane. "That was the out-of-pocket cost for my lumbar fusion. I cannot walk properly. I am in agony. You have effectively canceled my ability to function." Diane let out a loud, theatrical sigh, entirely devoid of empathy. She didn't view me as a suffering husband. She viewed me as an obstacle to her lifestyle. "Your back isn't that bad, Arthur. Stop acting like a baby," she said, the sheer cruelty of the words slicing through the digital connection. "You can take your painkillers and wait to get on the public insurance list. I needed that money for an investment that actually has a future. I can't be tied down by your medical drama right now. I have to go. As the words settled in the air between us, my lower back violently seized. It was a massive, paralyzing muscle spasm that shot straight into my sciatic nerve. I closed my eyes tightly. I bit down on the inside of my lower lip. I bit down so hard that the skin broke, and the warm, metallic taste of copper flooded my mouth. I refused to let her hear me groan. I refused to give her the satisfaction of hearing the pain she had intentionally condemned me to. I took a slow, jagged breath, tasting the blood. An investment with a future, I whispered, the words slipping out with absolute, icy finality. I understand. I didn't wait for her to respond. I pulled the phone away and ended the call. I sat on the fiberglass bench for another 5 minutes, allowing the physical spasm to subside into a manageable, dull burn. Then I stood up. I didn't call a nurse to ask for stronger medication, and I didn't call a friend to vent my grief. I walked slowly back to the billing counter, signed the formal surgical cancellation paperwork with a perfectly steady hand, and exited the hospital. I bypassed the patient pickup zone and flagged down a yellow taxi waiting at the curb. I climbed into the back seat, carefully maneuvering my braced torso. "Where to, buddy?" the driver asked, looking at my pale, sweating face in his rearview mirror. "Downtown," I instructed, pulling a handkerchief from my pocket to dab the blood from my lip. "Take me to the main branch of the First National Bank. I have an audit to conduct." Have you ever discovered that the person you swore to spend your life with valued a luxury toy over your actual life? Tell me your story in the comments, because my wife's investment was about to bankrupt her existence. The interior of the First National Bank in downtown Phoenix was a cavern of polished marble and hushed conversations. To the average person, a bank is simply a storage facility for currency. To a forensic accountant, a bank is a massive, meticulously indexed library of human behavior. Every transaction tells a story. Every withdrawal is a footprint left in the snow. I bypassed the standard teller line and dragged my agonizingly stiff left leg directly to the premium services desk. I sat down heavily in the leather guest chair, my cane resting against my knee. The bank manager I had spoken to on the phone recognized me immediately. He saw the sweat on my pale face and the unnatural rigidity of my braced torso, and he had the good sense not to offer me a complimentary bottle of water or engage in small talk. "Mr. Vance," he said quietly, turning his monitor. "I have the file you requested. I don't want a summary," I told him, my breathing shallow to prevent my back muscles from expanding too much. "I want to see the cleared instrument. Pull up the front and back digital scan of the cashier's check Diane requested yesterday." He clicked his mouse a few times. The high-resolution image of the $40,000 check appeared on the screen. The front was standard, drawn from our joint account, payable to Diane Vance. It was the back of the check that held the truth. I leaned forward, ignoring the sharp spike of pain radiating down my spine. There, stamped in bold blue ink on the endorsement line, was a commercial deposit seal. It did not belong to a hedge fund. It did not belong to a real estate holding company or a tech startup. The stamp read, "Pay to the order of Apex Auto Imports, Scottsdale, as." I stared at those words. An exotic car dealership is not a once-in-a-lifetime business investment. It is a graveyard for depreciating assets. Diane hadn't stolen my medical funds to secure our financial future. She had stolen them to buy a luxury vehicle. I requested a printed, certified copy of the cleared check, placed it carefully into my breast pocket, and walked back out into the blistering Arizona heat. If you think stealing medical funds is the lowest a person can go, hit the like button. Wait until you see how I used her own fraudulent signature to destroy them both. I took another taxi back to my house. The silence inside our home was absolute. I slowly lowered myself into the ergonomic chair behind my desk in the study. I did not take any painkillers. Opiates cloud the mind, and right now, my mind needed to operate with the terrifying, crystal-clear precision of a high-speed data processor. I opened my laptop and searched for Apex Auto Imports. They were a high-end boutique dealership dealing in imported European sports cars and American muscle. I picked up my phone and dialed their main sales line. When you investigate financial fraud, you quickly learn that the weakest link in any security chain is human ego and a desire to be helpful. You do not demand information. You create a scenario where the person on the other end voluntarily hands it over to you. Apex Auto. This is Derek in sales. A cheerful, energetic voice answered. "Hello, Derek. "This is Arthur Vance," I said, adopting the crisp, slightly bored tone of an insurance underwriter. "I am calling regarding the vehicle policy binder for the purchase made yesterday afternoon by my wife, Diane Vance. My broker needs me to verify the VIN and the primary registered driver's details before we can finalize the comprehensive coverage." Derek didn't hesitate. Car salesmen thrive on completed deals, and insurance verification is just a standard post-sale hurdle. "Oh, absolutely! Mr. Vance! Give me 1 second to pull up the file." Man, let me tell you, that torch red Chevrolet Corvette C8 she picked out is an absolute beauty. Fully loaded, Z51 performance package. She has great taste. A red Corvette. A $100,000 piece of fiberglass and adrenaline. "Yes, it is," I replied smoothly, writing the vehicle model down on a legal pad. "Could you confirm the primary driver registered on the title?" "Sure thing," Derek said, the sound of keyboard clicking echoing over the line. "The primary driver and title holder is listed as Chad Kingston." Chad Kingston. I recognized the name immediately. He was a 28-year-old personal trainer at the outrageously expensive Equinox gym Diane frequented in Scottsdale. She had mentioned him casually a few times, describing him as a fitness guru. Now, I knew exactly what kind of physical therapy she was actually receiving. My wife had canceled the surgery that would allow me to walk, just to put a $40,000 down payment on a supercar to keep her boy toy entertained. But as a forensic accountant, I knew the math was still incomplete. "Excellent," I said, maintaining my flat, professional cadence. "And just for the financial records, the total cash out the door price was roughly $100,000, correct? With $40,000 paid by cashier's check?" "Exactly," Derek confirmed enthusiastically. 40 grand down. And hey, I just want to say, thanks for co-signing the remaining $60,000 balance, Mr. Vance. Your Tier 1 credit score made the loan approval incredibly fast for your wife and Mr. Kingston. The finance manager said it was the easiest approval he's processed all week. My hand, which had been writing steadily on the legal pad, completely stopped. I didn't speak for a long moment. The hum of the air conditioning unit in my study seemed to amplify into a roar. "I'm glad to hear it went smoothly, Derek," I finally said, my voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze water. "Thank you for your time. Have a good day." I hung up the phone. The betrayal had just mutated. It was no longer just a cruel, moral failing. It was no longer a civil dispute over marital funds. In order to secure a $60,000 auto loan on a vehicle registered to her lover, Diane had to provide the dealership with a signed credit application. Because I wasn't there, she had physically forged my signature on a legally binding financial document. My wife hadn't just abandoned me to a life of crippling pain. She had committed felony identity theft and federal wire fraud, saddling me with massive debt for a car I did not own. The anger I felt didn't manifest as a hot, chaotic rage. It crystallized into a deadly, mathematical equation. Diane and Chad thought they had successfully scammed a crippled, tired old man. They didn't realize they had just handed a loaded, legal weapon directly to a veteran forensic auditor. I picked up my pen. It was time to draft the indictment. The afternoon sun began to dip below the Phoenix horizon, casting long, sharp shadows across the hardwood floor of my study. My spine felt as though it was filled with crushed glass, every microscopic movement generating a sickening friction against my nerve endings. But the human brain is a remarkable instrument. When presented with a complex, high-stakes puzzle, it can temporarily quarantine physical agony to focus entirely on survival. Diane believed she had trapped me in a corner. She assumed that by draining our joint liquid assets, I would be entirely paralyzed, both physically and financially. She made the fatal miscalculation of underestimating a man whose entire career was built on uncovering hidden money. I reached forward, wincing as the rigid plastic of my back brace dug into my ribs and opened a secure, encrypted browser window on my laptop. When you spend 30 years watching millionaires, CEOs, and supposedly happy spouses destroy each other over money, you develop a very cynical, heavily insulated approach to personal finance. Long before I met Diane, I had established a segregated, high-yield private trust. I didn't hide it to be malicious. I maintained it as a black swan fund, a strictly regulated emergency reserve designed to protect my baseline survival against catastrophic, unforeseen events. Diane's name was not on the trust. She didn't even know the institution that held it. I bypassed the dual-factor authentication and initiated a direct, expedited wire transfer of $40,000 from the trust directly to the Mercy General Hospital Surgical Billing Department. Once the confirmation code flashed green on my screen, I picked up my phone and called Brenda. "Mr. Vance," she answered, sounding genuinely surprised. "Brenda, I just wired the $40,000 out-of-pocket balance via an external private trust," I informed her, my voice tight but steady. "Check your clearing ledger." I heard the rapid clicking of her keyboard, followed by a sharp intake of breath. "I see it, Mr. Vance. The funds are verified and locked. But your original surgical slot for tomorrow has already been given to an emergency trauma patient." "I expected that," I replied, staring blankly at the wall. "When is the surgeon's next available opening?" "Next Wednesday morning," she said. "I will reserve it for you right now." "Thank you, Brenda." I hung up the phone. I had secured my physical salvation. Now, I had exactly 7 days to orchestrate a financial and legal execution. I unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a fresh, yellow legal pad. I picked up my pen. I didn't write a diary entry, and I didn't draft an emotional letter to my cheating wife. I began constructing a chronological timeline of fraudulent events, complete with time-stamped financial documentation, bank manager names, and the contact information for Apex Auto Imports. I built a case file so airtight it could survive a federal grand jury. When the timeline was complete, I made my second phone call. I dialed the direct cell phone number of Detective Ray Miller. Ray wasn't a beat cop. He was a senior investigator in the Maricopa County Economic Crimes Division. Over the last decade, my forensic accounting firm had partnered with his unit on dozens of high-profile corporate embezzlement and money laundering cases. Ray was a predator who hunted white-collar criminals, and we spoke the exact same language of ledgers, liabilities, and indictments. "Artie," Ray's gravelly voice came through the speaker. "I thought you were going under the knife tomorrow morning. What are you doing calling me?" "The surgery has been delayed by a week, Ray," I said, leaning back into my chair and letting out a slow, controlled breath. "I have a case for you, and this one is entirely personal." "Talk to me," Ray said, his tone instantly shifting from friendly to professional. I spent the next 10 minutes laying out the exact sequence of events with clinical detachment. I explained the intercepted wire transfer, the $40,000 cashier's check, the red Corvette C8 registered to Chad Kingston, and the lethal centerpiece of the entire operation: the forged signature on the $60,000 credit application. I heard a heavy silence on the other end of the line, followed by the sound of a pen tapping aggressively against a desk. "Artie, I am so incredibly sorry," Ray finally said, the quiet anger in his voice unmistakable. "To pull a stunt like that while you're literally crippled. She's a monster. But if you want to file for divorce and get the 40 grand back, you know that's a civil matter. It's marital funds, even if she used it for a scumbag boyfriend. I am not calling you for marriage counseling, Ray, and I don't care about a messy civil divorce right now." I corrected him sharply, the pain in my back radiating upward. "I am calling to report a felony. You and I both know that crossing state banking lines to secure a $60,000 commercial auto loan using a forged signature is federal wire fraud and severe identity theft. The bank holding that paper has a fraudulent security interest. The loan is entirely toxic." Ray let out a low whistle, fully realizing the trap I had just laid out. "You're right. The moment you file the official police report for identity theft, that loan contract is null and void. The lender will immediately flag the vehicle as fraudulently obtained property. They are going to want to secure that asset immediately to mitigate their losses." "Precisely," I confirmed. "I am emailing you the certified copy of the cashier's check, the dealership details, and my sworn affidavit of forgery right now. I want the criminal fraud report filed officially tonight." Concurrently, my attorney is filing an emergency civil injunction tomorrow morning to freeze all of Diane's access to our remaining joint accounts due to unauthorized misappropriation of funds. "I'll fast-track the fraud report," Ray promised, the predatory edge returning to his voice. "Once the lender gets the official police alert, they will issue a priority repossession order. They won't wait for a court date. They'll send a recovery agent to snatch that Corvette off the street the second they locate it." "I know exactly where they will be," I said, looking at the calendar on my desk. "Tomorrow is Saturday. Chad Kingston is a personal trainer who just acquired a $100,000 supercar. Men like that do not keep their trophies hidden in a garage. They parade them. They will be at the Equinox Gym in Scottsdale by 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. I want you there, Ray, and I want to be there to watch. I'll personally coordinate with the repo unit and the Scottsdale PD. Ray said. Get some rest, Artie. We drop the hammer tomorrow. I ended the call and placed the phone on my desk. The legal machinery was now fully operational. The trap was armed. I reached into my pocket, finally pulling out a heavy prescription painkiller. I swallowed it dry, closed my eyes, and waited for the darkness to take the pain away. Saturday afternoon in Scottsdale, Arizona, is a prime showcase of wealth and vanity. The sprawling parking lot of the Equinox Fitness Club on Camelback Road was packed with matte black G-Wagons, sleek Porsches, and custom Range Rovers. I was sitting in the passenger seat of Detective Ray Miller's unmarked Ford Police Interceptor, parked discreetly under the dense shade of a large palm tree near the entrance. The air conditioning was running at maximum capacity, but beneath my button-down shirt, the heavy, rigid plastic of my back brace trapped the heat against my skin, creating a suffocating layer of sweat. Every shallow breath I took was a calculated effort to minimize the grinding friction in my lower spine. At exactly 3:25 p.m., the heavy glass doors of the premium gym swung open. Diane walked out, wearing matching designer athletic wear and oversized luxury sunglasses. Beside her was Chad Kingston. He was exactly the cliché I had envisioned. 28, heavily muscled, wearing a tight tank top that displayed tribal tattoos, and carrying a gallon-sized plastic water jug. They were laughing loudly, projecting the arrogant, invincible aura of a couple who believed they had successfully gamed the system. They walked straight toward a designated VIP parking space near the front. Sitting there, gleaming under the brutal desert sun, was the torch-red Chevrolet Corvette C8. It wasn't just a car. To my forensic eyes, it was a rolling confession of wire fraud, a $100,000 piece of physical evidence. Chad unlocked it with the electronic fob, the horn chirping sharply, and leaned casually against the driver's side door to chat with another gym member who had stopped to admire the vehicle. Diane smiled brightly, running her hand along the aerodynamic curve of the rear spoiler. In the front seat of the Interceptor, Ray Miller picked up his police radio. Target vehicle located. Move in. Less than 30 seconds later, the quiet hum of the luxury parking lot was violently shattered. A heavy-duty, flatbed tow truck with flashing yellow strobe lights aggressively turned into the driveway, followed immediately by two fully marked Scottsdale Police Department cruisers. Their sirens gave a short, authoritative whoop as they angled their vehicles to completely block the Corvette from backing out of the parking space. Chad's arrogant smile vanished instantly. He dropped his heavy water jug onto the asphalt, stepping away from the gym member he was talking to, and marched aggressively toward the tow truck as the operator jumped out and began lowering the hydraulic stinger lift. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Chad yelled, his face flushing red with sudden anger. "Get away from my car! Are you blind? I'm parked legally!" Ray opened his door and stepped out into the heat, the gold detective shield clipped to his belt, catching the fierce sunlight. "Step back from the vehicle, Master Kingston," Ray commanded, his voice carrying the deep, unmistakable resonance of veteran law enforcement. Diane rushed forward, grabbing Chad's muscular arm and glaring at the uniformed officers stepping out of the cruisers. "This is outrageous," she shrieked, instantly deploying the indignant outrage of a wealthy socialite. "Who is your commanding officer? We put $40,000 down on this car yesterday. You cannot tow it. My husband co-signed the loan. It is fully financed." I pushed the heavy passenger door of the Interceptor open. I planted my wooden cane firmly onto the scorching asphalt. I tightened the straps on my back brace, clenched my jaw to brace against the agonizing spike of pain shooting down my sciatic nerve, and began the slow, grueling walk toward the scene. "That is exactly why the vehicle is being repossessed. MS. Vance," Ray stated, stepping expertly between Chad and the Corvette. "The financial institution holding the paper on this vehicle was notified this morning that the $60,000 promissory note was secured using a forged signature. The lender has declared the contract entirely fraudulent and void. They have initiated an emergency repossession to recover their stolen asset." "Stolen?" Chad scoffed, puffing out his chest and taking a physically aggressive step toward the detective. "I have the title right here on my phone! I didn't steal anything! You badge-heavy rent-a-cop! I'm the registered owner!" Ray didn't flinch. He simply reached to his tactical belt and unclipped a pair of heavy steel handcuffs. "Chad Kingston, you are under arrest for the receipt and possession of fraudulently obtained commercial property." Before Chad could even process the legal terminology, Ray spun the much larger man around, grabbed his thick wrists, and slammed the steel cuffs shut with a sharp, metallic clack. Diane gasped, stepping back in pure horror. The confident, wealthy persona completely evaporated, replaced by a terrified woman rapidly realizing the catastrophic consequences of a federal crime. Chad, wait! No, officer! There's been a mistake! I had verbal permission to sign for my husband. He was sick. He couldn't go to the dealership. It's a misunderstanding. The rhythmic, heavy tapping of my cane against the asphalt finally announced my arrival. Diane snapped her head toward the sound when she saw me standing there, sweating heavily, wearing the rigid medical brace she had mercilessly mocked, but looking at her with the cold, absolute detachment of an auditor who had just balanced a lethal ledger. The remaining color completely drained from her face. Her oversized sunglasses slipped slightly down her nose. She looked like she had just seen a ghost. In a way, she had. She was looking at the man she thought she had successfully left to suffer. "Arthur?" she whispered, her voice trembling violently. What are you doing here?" "I am here to oversee a financial audit," I said, my voice deliberately flat and completely devoid of emotion. Ray turned his attention to Diane, pulling a second pair of handcuffs from the back of his belt. "Diane Vance, you are under arrest for felony identity theft and federal wire fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "No, Arthur, tell them!" Diane screamed, thrashing wildly as a uniformed officer stepped forward to assist Ray in securing her wrists behind her back. The handcuffs clicked shut, locking her in place. "Arthur, please! You can't let them do this! It was just a car! I was gonna pay it back! Please! Arthur, look at me!" The tow truck's hydraulic lift whined loudly, raising the front wheels of the torch-red Corvette completely off the ground. Chad was being forcefully shoved into the back of a police cruiser, cursing loudly and already screaming to the officers that Diane had lied to him, desperately trying to throw her under the bus to save himself. I took one final, painful step forward, leaning heavily on my cane until I was standing just a few feet away from my wife. She was completely restrained, her expensive athletic wear contrasting absurdly with the cold steel locked around her wrists. She was crying hysterically, but I felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no sorrow, no lingering affection. I simply saw a closed account and a neutralized liability. "You were right, Diane," I told her, looking directly into her panicked, tear-filled eyes. "It was an investment with a future. Your future is 3 to 5 years in federal prison." I turned my back on her and began the slow, methodical walk back to the unmarked police car. The equation was finally balanced. The legal system, much like a forensic audit, operates on a rigid set of rules completely devoid of emotion or pity. Once the machinery of federal justice was fully activated, the dismantling of Diane's life was breathtakingly swift and mathematically absolute. The financial institution didn't just repossess the torch-red Corvette. They quickly liquidated the asset at a commercial auto auction and immediately filed a severe civil judgment against Diane for the remaining depreciation deficit. Chad Kingston, the arrogant fitness guru, who thought he had effortlessly secured a $100,000 supercar, proved his loyalty to Diane lasted exactly as long as it took to reach an interrogation room. To avoid a federal prison cell, Chad immediately turned state's evidence. He sang like a canary, testifying that Diane had orchestrated the entire fraudulent financial maneuver. He secured himself a heavily monitored, 3-year probationary sentence for receiving stolen property, leaving Diane to absorb the full, devastating impact of the federal indictment. The prosecutor did not offer a lenient plea deal for aggravated identity theft and federal wire fraud. Concurrently, my attorney filed an expedited, fault-based divorce petition. Because Diane had deliberately misappropriated joint medical funds to commit a felony, the family court judge completely stripped her of any claim to my remaining assets, my pension, or any form of spousal support. She walked into the courtroom hoping to save her lifestyle, and she walked out with absolutely nothing. Her designer wardrobe, her premium gym memberships, and her desperate illusion of perpetual youth were permanently traded for a standard-issue khaki jumpsuit and a 46-month sentence in a federal correctional facility. 3 months have passed since that scorching Saturday afternoon in the Equinox parking lot. It is a cool, crisp Wednesday morning in Phoenix. I am standing in the main physical therapy gymnasium at Mercy General Hospital. The familiar, sharp scent of industrial bleach still hangs in the air, but it no longer smells like an impending disaster. It smells like clinical progress. I reach down to my waist. I grab the heavy, thick Velcro straps of the rigid plastic medical back brace that had served as my physical prison for the last 2 years. I pull them apart, the fabric tearing open with a loud, satisfying sound. I pull the heavy plastic shell away from my torso and drop it directly into a nearby medical disposal bin. It hits the bottom with a hollow, empty clatter. I turn and look at the heavy wooden cane resting against the parallel bars. I do not reach for it. Instead, I plant my left foot firmly onto the rubberized mat of the gym floor. I deliberately shift my entire body weight onto that leg. There is no sudden, violent spasm. There is no paralyzing, electrical fire shooting down my sciatic nerve. There is only the firm, quiet, stable sensation of titanium, muscle, and bone holding exactly as the neurosurgeon engineered them to. The complex, multi-level lumbar fusion, funded by the private trust Diane never knew existed, was a complete and total medical success. I take another step, then another. I am walking. For the first time in over 24 months, my posture is perfectly straight. My breathing is deep, steady, and entirely unhindered by the anticipation of agony. I walk past the physical therapy equipment, out through the automatic sliding glass doors of the hospital lobby, and directly into the bright, morning Arizona sunlight. The heat feels good on my back. I am a man who has successfully audited his own existence, ruthlessly severing a toxic, parasitic liability to protect my most vital asset, my life. Money can buy a lot of things. It can buy luxury. It can buy illusions. But it can never buy back the trust you destroy to get it. Never let anyone convince you that your health and well-being are secondary to their greed. Subscribe if you believe justice is the best medicine, and I'll see you in the next story.